News today that Standard & Poor's is one of the credit agencies that rates Victoria's massive debt is warning today that we could face a credit downgrade. What we're seeing in Victoria is a type of recklessness, a type of irresponsible management of the state's finances from Jacinta Allen and her government that we haven't seen in decades. I want all Victorians to understand the level of debt we're paying now affects all of us individually, our own households, our own businesses. When the government overspends in this massive way, with debt going up an extra $6.5 billion over the next 4 years, with extra interest payments on that additional debt of nearly $2 billion, we all individually pay for it. We pay for it in the form of higher taxes. We pay for it in the form of reduced services in health, education, and all the other services we rely upon. And we've learned recently that because of the way Jacinta Allen and her government are mismanaging the state's finances, all of us as Victorians are paying for it through higher interest rates. We know from the International Monetary Fund, the Reserve Bank of Australia, and even the Federal Labor Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, that massive state debt that Victoria has is contributing to higher mortgage repayments that Victorian households and businesses are facing. Debt matters to all of us, and we see today the consequences of this when ratings agencies are warning of further downgrades. And we saw with the budget update on Friday that lays out changes in Victoria's fiscal position since the May budget, that there is a level of stubbornness and recklessness, an irresponsible approach to the state's finances that should be a concern to all Victorians. At a time when the government needs to lay out a plan for reducing cost of living by reducing the debt we pay and the interest and taxes we pay, Jacinta Allen is in fact going in the other direction as if there's no problem. She is happy to continue to raise our level of debt that we're all on the hook for. She's happy to see taxes increase by an extra $1.1 billion every year going forward. She's happy to see us as all Victorians pay an extra $2 billion in interest on additional debt over the next 4 years. Jacinta Allen and Tim Pallas are acting like there's no problem here. Well, there is a problem. And the problem is that all Victorians are paying for this reckless and irresponsible approach to our state's finances. Our population is growing. We have new and emerging communities right across our state, in particular in growth suburbs around Melbourne. We need leadership of this state that is sensible, based on common sense, one that is responsible and prudent, one that understands that in order to support communities right across our state, not just those around inner Melbourne, but in the outer suburbs and growth corridors and our regions and rural parts of our great state, in order to support them, sound and prudent financial management of our state is more vital than ever. And with the pressures that many parts of our state are facing because there's no money left to invest in hospitals, schools, roads and public transport, this is why the level of recklessness, the kind of irresponsible approach to financial management by Jacinta Allen matters so much at this time, and why our state needs much better leadership, one based on a vision that sees all of Victoria share in the benefits of our potential as a great state, but that depends on a government that spends the taxpayers' dollars wisely and carefully right across our state so everyone can benefit. Not in a way which sees debt go up, taxes go up, interest on our debt go up, and interest rates on our mortgages go up as a result of that mismanagement. I'll hand over to David Southwood.
Thank you very much, JP. Well, when you have one major project that blows out, that might be bad luck. When you have $38 billion worth of budget blowouts, that is bad management. And it is clear that we have a Premier at the moment that just can't manage major projects and can't manage money, and Victorians are all paying the price. For the government to actually do something about this, they've got to recognise they have a problem. Jacinta Allen clearly doesn't recognise that she has any problem at all. She keeps blaming someone else for the massive mismanagement that we're all seeing ultimately translate to a cost of living crisis, which all Victorians are feeling right now. That is why I've written to the Auditor General for a full review of every major transport infrastructure project in Victoria, to ensure that we can guarantee the infrastructure pipeline going forward. Whether it be North East Link, that we've already seen a $10 billion blowout in 8 months, but whether also Metro Tunnel, Westgate Tunnel, a number of the level crossings, and also the SRL. If the government has seen a blowout of this magnitude already with North East Link, what does that mean for every other project? And I think it would be fair to say that every excuse that the Premier has given in terms of North East Link would apply to every one of these other projects. Jacinta Allen says we've had a war, we've had COVID, we've had all kinds of different things. Well, under every single one of these projects, Westgate Tunnel, Metro, level crossings, all of these projects need to be recosted to understand how much the blowouts are under Jacinta Allen's watch. And what that means is every single Victorian will have less money when it comes to everyday living. Our roads, our schools, our hospitals, all of that will be sacrificed because Jacinta Allen can't manage these major projects. And we would call on the Premier today to reconsider what she is doing in terms of signing up Victoria to her vanity project, the SRL. The SRL was costed back in 2021 with a very flimsy business case. Now, we're meant to believe that that project itself hasn't blown out. If the North East Link has blown out by $10 billion in 8 months, what does that mean to a business case that was done in 2021? Jacinta Allen needs to make sure that that project that she has signed Victorians up to stacks up. Jacinta Allen has signed a contract only 2 days before we saw a blowout to $10 billion on the North East Link. That is reckless, that is financially irresponsible, and that is signing Victorians up to more debt that we can't afford. Jacinta Allen needs to explain to Victorians how we're going to be able to continue to balance the books going forward. This is reckless, this is irresponsible by the Premier, and she can't keep blaming somebody else. Jacinta Allen needs to acknowledge that she has a problem, and we've got to start looking at how we can fix it going forward. And that is why we're asking the Auditor-General to do an urgent review of every single major project to make sure they stack up and we can afford our pipeline going forward. I might hand over to Brad Roswell.
Thanks very much, David, JP. Well, welcome to Victoria, a state in the nation that has the highest taxes, has the highest debt and has the highest interest rate, whilst also having the lowest credit rating as well. Now, interest rates matter, credit ratings matter for this reason. If a credit rating further downgrades in this state, that means our interest rate goes up. And if our interest rate goes up, that means Victorians pay more. The inclination of the Allen Labor government to tax more is absolutely there for the taking. And given that they've introduced 53 new or increased taxes in the last 9 years, it's absolutely no wonder that is their inclination to make Victorians' lives harder at a time when they can least afford it. What we need to be doing is everything we possibly can to try and keep our credit rating as high as it possibly can be. And frankly, if Labor don't acknowledge they have a problem, they can't fix the problem. They don't acknowledge that they have a problem, and they've got S&P knocking at their door today, telling them that they potentially have a problem, and I'll be very interested to see, as part of the budget process next year, where our interest ratings land as a state. The economy under this Allen Labor government is an absolute shocker. We learned on Friday that we're paying something like $24 billion a day in interest payments alone. In the last 6 months, since the budget, we've learnt that our debt is raised by $1 billion each and every month. This is not good. This is not good for Victorians. Victorians are expected to run their household budgets in a responsible way. Businesses are expected to run their business budgets in a responsible way. So why should it be any different for the Allen Labor government?
Thanks, Brad. Any questions for Brad, David or I?
What are you expecting from the next budget? What needs to be brought to talk that we don't know about yet?
Yeah, good question. I'm not expecting the Allen Labor government to change type today, Chardell. Frankly, over the last 9 years, they have introduced 53 new or increased taxes. You know, we've got the highest debt in the nation. We're paying the highest taxes in the nation. I'm expecting more taxes. I'm expecting more bad news for Victorians. Their revenue is going up, their tax income is going up, but their debt continues to rise. That means that their waste is completely and utterly out of control. The waste on major projects in the last 9 years has now hit something like $38 billion. It's an absolute and utter disgrace, and frankly, Victorians should see it and name it for what it is, because Victorians are the people who have to pay. The great injustice of this is that it's the Allan Labor government who makes these very poor decisions, but it's Victorians that have to pay the price because of it.
What's Victoria's monthly interest bill at the moment, and what can that be used to pay for instead?
I'm not entirely sure of our monthly interest bill, but I know our total interest bill is about $8 billion a year, so divide that by 12 and you get a ballpark figure. And what could that be paid for to pay for instead? Something like 30,000 teachers, nurses, police officers, at a time when our health system's failing, where our education system and results are flatlining, and where our community really needs to feel safer than they currently do. When we're paying our interest bill, we're effectively taking a whole bucket of cash and we're setting it alight. We're missing the opportunity to invest in the services and the infrastructure that the people of this state need right now.
So should we just can the big bill? What do we need to do?
I might throw to David or JP for that, but frankly, if things need to be looked at, then we should be looking at that in terms of the scheduling of things, in terms of the costing of things. If we can't afford things now, we should be looking at that, and that's one of the reasons why we've written to the Auditor General, so they can look at that matter. David, do you want to add to that?
I think what we're actually now finding out is that you can't do it all at once, and you've got to stage and plan projects going forward. Jacinda Ardern makes a number of assumptions that you can just move labour around from different projects, that you can move equipment around from different projects. You can't do that. Each and every one of these projects have contracts that are associated to different builds. And ultimately, what we're seeing is a shortage of labour, a shortage of materials, and ultimately we're all paying the price. We also have a massive need for housing. You can't build the housing and you can't build these massive infrastructure projects all at once without something bursting. And that's largely why we're seeing a lot of the blowouts. The government aren't managing these projects properly. Victorians are all paying the price. And until such time as the government does their homework and plans out the infrastructure going forward, we're going to see blowouts continue to rise. We're going to see mismanagement continue, and ultimately many of these projects will fall over. There is so much doubt whether Jacinda Ardern is going to be able to fulfil many of these major projects. There's so many questions here, and that is why it is so important that Jacinda Ardern doesn't rush out and keep signing up more of these contracts on the SRL going forward without getting the full Auditor General report and review in terms of where we are at the moment. You don't start spending more money until you understand what you've actually got. And at the moment, we're seeing a state that has spent so much money, has got so much debt, and yet we keep signing up more of these contracts. It is financially reckless for the Premier to keep signing up these contracts, particularly when we've seen a blowout of one of the major infrastructure projects like the North East Link. The Premier must just take a step back and ensure we don't send Victoria off a cliff, because that's where we're heading at the moment. Jacinda Ardern is sending Victoria off a cliff, and Victorians are paying the price because she hasn't managed these major projects properly.
Have you thought about which projects you prioritise and what should be put on the back burner?
Yeah, well again, I don't know what the rush is to be signing up to the SRL project. $200 billion worth of money, a vanity project which will see no other infrastructure spent anywhere else in the state. It is a project which so many other Victorians will be looking at and saying, well, what about me? What about the north? What about the west? What about the airport rail? What about the Geelong Fast Rail? There are so many other things that we could be looking at doing, yet if you put all of your eggs in one basket like the SRL, then ultimately you pay the price of not being able to do anything else. And it is so reckless to think that 2 days before we saw a $10 billion blowout of the North East Link, Jacinda Ardern quickly signs up to $3 billion worth of infrastructure to build a tunnel. You wouldn't do that in your wildest dreams. I think there is lots of questions that the Premier needs to be asked in terms of being financially responsible. This is reckless. If you're a CEO of a company and you signed up to new contracts knowing full well that what you're actually doing was going out the door, you would be sacked. Jacinta Allen's got a lot of questions to answer right now because she's signing Victorians up to massive debt. We're all paying the price, and ultimately we don't know where this is going to head.
But if we don't do it now, where it just costs more in the long run?
Well, I mean, that would be the same to everything in terms of things will always cost, things will always increase. But if you're reckless in terms of what you're signing Victorians up to, it'll cost even more because what you're doing, particularly now, it's a perfect storm where you've got a number of these projects all being done at once, and because you're doing them all at once, you've got a labour shortage, you've got a material shortage, so you're paying that much more. If we just staged out the projects going forward, Victoria would be able to manage the infrastructure spend, and ultimately we'd be able to get more housing stock in the market because the cost of housing is higher than anywhere else in the state. You can't build housing in Victoria because all of our materials and labour is being consumed into the big build. Jacinta Allen hasn't managed this properly at all. She hasn't inherited this. This was her projects right from the very beginning. So Jacinta Allen needs to ensure that our infrastructure is costed, and that's why the Victorian Auditor General needs to step in now and review all of this costing, and then take a look at what do we need to prioritise, how do we do it so we can actually get best value for money, and ultimately finish the projects we started. The biggest and worst legacy that we could ever imagine would be to only half do a job and walk away because Victoria can't afford it.
Any other questions? We're all good. Okay, thanks everyone.